He stepped in front of flying arrows. To save the Queen reaches its dramatic apex when Queen Zareth defies centuries of tradition by bestowing the royal blood signet upon Ren before the 12 lords. As Lord Nexus attacks in rage, the Queen unleashes her fire magic in Ren's defense, shattering ancient hierarchies and declaring to all that loyalty transcends bloodline, forever altering the fate of Ravathor. The twin suns of Ravathor hung low in the copper-red sky, casting long shadows across the battle-scarred terrain. Gleaming citadels dotted the canyon ridges, where the armies of Rava and the Upper Alliance fought for dominance. Amidst the chaos stood a nameless Terran soldier, low caste, bearing no insignia or title. His weathered face revealed nothing of his thoughts as he observed the battlefield from his position among the Raven infantry. Across the field, Queen Zareth commanded her forces with unwavering authority. Her skin glowed like hot coals, her black hair, streaked with silver, whipped in the desert wind, and her burning yellow eyes surveyed the battlefield with calculated precision. The pressure of midday weighed heavily upon all as sand swirled through the air, mixing with the sounds of shouting and clashing metal that echoed against the rock walls. The nameless soldier noticed something the others had missed, a silhouette on the ridge above, too still to be a mirage. The assassin's desert cloak billowed slightly in the hot breeze as he calmly nocked an arrow. Not just any arrow, but 3 barbed shafts coated with the royal killing poison that the Upper Alliance was known to favor. The Queen, focused on commanding her troops, remained oblivious to the imminent threat. In that fraction of a second, the Terran made a decision that would alter the course of history. Without hesitation, he sprinted across the battlefield, ignoring the clashing swords and screams around him. Time seemed to slow as the assassin released the bowstring. "Your Majesty!" The words tore from his throat as he launched himself forward, placing his body between the Queen and the incoming arrows. The impact was like being struck by white-hot metal. One arrow pierced his shoulder, another his side, and the third his thigh. The pain was immediate and excruciating, like liquid fire coursing through his veins, the first sign of the assassin's poison taking effect. He collapsed at the Queen's feet, blood already soaking through his standard-issue armor. Queen Zareth's golden eyes widened in shock as she realized what had happened. Her guards swarmed around her, creating a protective formation while archers scanned the ridge for the would-be killer. But the assassin had already disappeared into the desert landscape, leaving only the evidence of his attempt embedded in the Terran's body. "Get a healer," the Queen commanded, her voice cutting through the battle noise, "and secure the perimeter." The soldier's vision blurred as the poison worked through his system. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the Queen's face, a mixture of concern and confusion in her burning gaze. "Why?" she whispered. But darkness claimed him before he could answer. Hours later, as the wounded soldier drifted in and out of consciousness, the battle continued to rage. The Upper Alliance, having failed in their assassination attempt, launched a more direct assault. Through the haze of pain, the Terran heard the distinctive rumble of mechanized war beasts approaching the city gates. "The Alliance has breached the outer perimeter," a voice announced. "They've brought in a war machine bearing their banner." Queen Zareth stood near the soldier's makeshift cot in the field medical tent. "How did they get past our defenses? Someone within these walls must have aided them." The suspicion in her voice was clear. The soldier forced his eyes open, fighting against the lingering effects of the poison. His wounds had been hastily treated, but the antidote was incomplete, meant to keep him alive, not heal him completely. With a groan, he pushed himself upright. "Your Majesty," he croaked, "the machine." "Rest, soldier," she commanded, but her attention was already drawn to the commotion outside, ignoring the searing pain that shot through his body. The Terran staggered to his feet and stumbled out of the tent. The massive war machine was barreling toward the inner gates, its metal legs crushing everything in its path. Without thinking, He grabbed a discarded energy pike and limped toward the mechanical beast. Blood soaked through his bandages as he pushed his body beyond its limits. The war machine towered above him, a monstrous creation of metal and fire. The soldier spotted an access panel near one of the legs, a weakness in the otherwise impenetrable armor. With the last of his strength, he jammed the energy pike into the panel and activated it. Electricity surged through the machine's control systems, causing it to lurch and stutter. The soldier clung to the metal leg as the war machine convulsed, sparks flying from its damaged circuits. With a final, deafening groan, the behemoth collapsed, missing the inner gate by mere meters. The Terran fell from the machine, landing hard on the stone pavement. Fresh blood pooled beneath him, but a small smile touched his lips as he saw the Alliance forces retreating in disarray. Their primary weapon disabled. Queen Zareth approached, her royal guard forming a protective circle around her. She looked down at the soldier with an unreadable expression. "Twice now," she said quietly. "Twice you have placed yourself between me and death." Before he could respond, the Queen's advisors surrounded her, speaking in urgent whispers. "Your Majesty, this is unprecedented," one elderly counselor hissed. "The man is Terran, low caste. To allow him such proximity to your royal person—" "He saved my life," the Queen interrupted. "Even so, there are protocols. The bloodline laws clearly state—" "I know the laws," Queen Zareth said sharply. "But consider this. Had he not intervened, we would now be performing the succession rites instead of arguing about protocol." A masked advisor stepped forward, his face hidden behind an obsidian visor that revealed only his eyes, cold and calculating. "Your Majesty, I must caution you. You have already violated the bloodline covenant by allowing this foreigner's blood to mix with royal ground. The 12 lords will not stand for further transgressions." The Queen's eyes flashed dangerously. "Then perhaps it is time the 12 lords remembered who wears the crown." She gestured to her personal guards. "Take him to the throne tower, discreetly." "Your Majesty," the masked advisor protested. "The healing chambers in the throne tower are reserved exclusively for royal blood." "Are you questioning my command?" Queen Zareth asked, her voice soft but deadly. The advisor bowed stiffly. "Never, Your Majesty. I merely advise caution." As the royal guards lifted the injured soldier onto a floating stretcher, he heard the whispers of the court. Exile would be the kindest option. The execution grounds have not seen use this season. The Queen risks everything for a nameless grunt. Darkness claimed him once more before he could hear the Queen's response. When the soldier next awoke, he found himself in a chamber unlike any he had ever seen. The walls were made of polished obsidian that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The only illumination came from floating orbs of crimson energy that pulsed gently, like heartbeats. He lay on a bed of what appeared to be liquid metal that conformed perfectly to his body, supporting him without pressure on his wounds. More surprising than his surroundings was the absence of pain. Looking down at himself, he saw that his wounds were sealed with a glowing red substance that seemed to move beneath his skin like living fire. "Bloodlight healing," came a voice from the shadows. "The most ancient magic of the Ravan royal house." Queen Zareth stepped into the pool of light cast by the floating orbs. Without her battle armor, she seemed smaller, though no less regal. Her simple robe of deep crimson complemented her fire-red skin, and her silver-streaked hair was loose around her shoulders. "It is usually reserved for those of royal blood," she continued, "but I made an exception." The soldier tried to sit up, but found his body unwilling to cooperate fully. "Why?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. The Queen approached his bedside, studying him with those penetrating golden eyes. "I could ask you the same question. Why did you step in front of those arrows? Why risk your life for mine?" He considered the question seriously. "I saw the assassin. I knew what would happen if I didn't act." He paused. I couldn't let anyone die if I could prevent it. Even a queen. Even a queen, she repeated, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. Most would say especially a queen. I'm not most people, Your Majesty. Clearly not. She circled his bed, her movements graceful and measured. You're not from Ravathor. Your accent suggests Earth colony. Perhaps the Orion settlements? New Mars, originally, he replied. Enlisted with the Interstellar Legion 10 years ago. Was assigned to Ravan forces 6 months back. And yet you were willing to die for a queen not your own. A planet, not your home. He shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at his healing wounds. Right thing to do. Queen Zareth stopped her pacing and faced him directly. Do you know what you've done by saving me? Beyond the obvious? The soldier shook his head. You've upset centuries of tradition. The royal bloodline of Ravathor has remained pure since the first landing. No outsider has ever been permitted in the sacred healing chambers. No low-caste blood has ever mingled with royal blood on sanctified ground. She gestured to the chamber around them. And yet, here you are. I apologize for the inconvenience, Your Majesty, he said dryly. To his surprise, the queen laughed. A warm, rich sound that seemed to brighten the dim chamber. You continue to defy expectations. Soldier. Most would be trembling with fear or awe in my presence. Been shot with 3 poisoned arrows today. Your Majesty. Puts things in perspective. Her expression sobered. Indeed it does. She moved closer, studying his face with newfound interest. What is your name? Designation TE-4721, he responded automatically. Not your military designation, your name. The soldier hesitated. It's been so long since anyone used it. I've almost forgotten it myself. Try to remember, she urged, her voice unexpectedly gentle. Ren, he said finally. Ren Castile. Ren Castile of New Mars, she said, as if testing the name. Rest now. Tomorrow will bring challenges enough for both of us. As she turned to leave, Ren called out, Your Majesty, what challenges? Queen Zareth paused at the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim light beyond. The 12 lords have called for an inquest. It seems saving a queen's life is an offense worthy of their attention when performed by someone of your station. And what will happen? That, she said, depends on how willing they are to embrace change. The obsidian doors closed behind her, leaving Ren alone with the pulsing crimson lights and the growing realization that his impulsive act of heroism had entangled him in the dangerous politics of a royal court. The next morning, Ren was provided with formal attire, black and crimson, the colors of the royal house. The garments were finer than anything he had ever worn, made of a material that seemed to shift and flow like liquid shadow. His wounds, while still tender, had healed remarkably overnight. The bloodlight magic had done its work well. A silent attendant led him through the labyrinthine corridors of the throne tower. The architecture was both beautiful and intimidating, soaring ceilings supported by columns of black glass, floors inlaid with patterns of red gold that seemed to move when viewed from different angles. Everywhere, the royal emblem of Ravathor was displayed, a twin-sunned planet encircled by a ring of fire. They arrived at a massive double door made of the same obsidian as the healing chamber. 2 guards stood at attention, their armor more ceremonial than practical. But the weapons at their sides were very real. They regarded Ren with open suspicion as the attendant announced their arrival. The doors swung open silently, revealing the great obsidian hall. The ceiling arched high above, giving the impression of infinite space. 12 ornate chairs were arranged in a semicircle on a raised dais, each occupied by a member of the noble houses of Ravathor. Behind them stood their retinues, advisors, guards, and family members. To the side, a smaller throne of black metal and red crystal awaited the queen. The center of the hall was empty, save for a single, circular platform of polished stone. The attendant directed Ren to stand upon it. As he took his position, he felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. The whispers began immediately, some curious, most hostile. A Terran in royal colors? Blasphemy against the bloodline covenant? The queen has lost her senses. The whispers died abruptly as a side door opened and Queen Zareth entered. She wore her full, ceremonial regalia, a gown of deepest black that seemed to absorb the light around it, adorned with intricate patterns of red gold. A crown of obsidian spikes encircled her head, each tip glowing with the same crimson energy that had healed Ren's wounds. She moved with measured grace to her throne, acknowledging the lords with the barest inclination of her head. Once seated, she regarded the assembly with calm authority. "The inquest of the 12 is called to order," announced a herald, striking a crystalline rod against the floor. The sound resonated through the hall like a distant bell. The eldest of the lords, a man whose red skin had faded to a dull orange with age, rose from his seat. "Your Majesty, we come together in grave concern for the sanctity of our traditions and the security of your reign." Queen Zareth nodded. "Speak your concerns, Lord Vantis. You have brought a low-caste foreigner into the sacred healing chambers. You have dressed him in royal colors. These actions violate the bloodline covenant that has governed our people since the first landing." Lord Vantis gestured toward Ren with a gnarled hand. "What explanation do you offer for these transgressions?" The queen's golden eyes flashed. "This man saved my life, twice. First by intercepting assassins' arrows meant for me. Then by single-handedly disabling an alliance war machine that would have breached our inner gates. His blood was spilled in my defense. I deemed it appropriate to ensure his survival. His heroism, while commendable, does not supersede our most sacred laws," insisted a younger lord, his ornate robes marking him as one of the more prosperous noble houses. "The bloodline must remain pure. The sacred chambers must remain untouched by outsider presence. These principles have ensured the stability of Ravathor for generations." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Ren stood silently on the platform, feeling increasingly like a specimen under examination. The nobles spoke about him as if he weren't present, debating his fate without once addressing him directly. "What would you have had me do?" Queen Zareth asked. "Allow him to die after he sacrificed himself for the crown? Would that have honored our traditions?" "The traditional reward for such service would have been a medal, a purse of gold, perhaps even elevation to a minor noble status," replied Lord Vantis. "Not access to our most sacred rituals and spaces." Another lord stood, this one tall and gaunt with eyes that burned almost as bright as the queen's. "The law is clear, Your Majesty. The penalty for a low-caste foreigner entering the sacred chambers is exile at best, execution at worst." A chill ran down Ren's spine at the casual way the man discussed his potential death. Queen Zareth rose from her throne, her movement silencing the hall. "I am well aware of the law, Lord Nexus. I am also aware that as queen, I have the authority to grant exceptions in extraordinary circumstances. An authority that has not been exercised in 7 generations, countered Lord Nexus. "Perhaps it is time it was." The queen descended from her throne and approached the platform where Ren stood. "The traditions you so zealously protect were established to preserve our way of life, to ensure the continuation of our royal line, and to protect our people. This man has done more to serve those ends in 2 days than many nobles have done in their lifetimes." She turned to face the 12 lords directly. "I have made my decision." From within the folds of her gown, she withdrew a small object that caught the light and sent crimson reflections dancing across the obsidian walls. A ring of red gold, inscribed with the royal emblem of Ravathor. Gasps echoed through the hall as the queen held it up for all to see. "The royal blood signet," whispered someone nearby, the words carrying in the suddenly silent hall. Queen Zareth turned to Ren. Kneel. Ren Castle of New Mars. Uncertain, but trusting her judgment, Ren lowered himself to one knee before her. By the authority vested in me as Queen of Ravathor, I hereby grant you the royal blood signet, marking you as one under the direct protection of the crown. She placed the ring in his palm, closing his fingers around it. From this day forward, any action against you shall be considered an action against the royal house itself. The hall erupted in chaos. Lords shouted protests. Retainers whispered urgently to their masters. Guards shifted uncomfortably at their posts. This is unprecedented. It violates every principle of our society. The bloodline. Silence! The queen's voice cut through the uproar like a blade. I have spoken. The decision is made. Lord Nexus pushed past his fellow nobles, descending from the dais with fury etched on his features. This goes beyond tradition, Your Majesty. This threatens the very foundation of our hierarchical order. If a low-caste foreigner can be elevated through a mere act of service, what message does that send to the populace? That loyalty and courage are rewarded, the queen replied evenly. That the crown values actions above birth. Dangerous sentiments in these unstable times. Lord Nexus's hand drifted to the ceremonial dagger at his belt, a movement not lost on Ren or the queen. Careful, Lord Nexus, Queen Zareth warned. Your proximity to treason grows uncomfortably close. The nobleman's face contorted with rage. In a flash of movement too quick for the guards to intercept, he drew his dagger and lunged, not at the queen, but at Ren. Ren, still weak from his injuries, barely managed to shift his body, the blade slicing across his arm instead of plunging into his chest. Blood, his blood, spattered on the sacred floor of the obsidian hall for the second time in as many days. What happened next would be recounted in whispers throughout Ravathor for generations to come. Queen Zareth stepped between Ren and Lord Nexus, her hand raised in a gesture that was both defensive and commanding. Any who doubts my judgment, she declared, her voice resonating with power, shall answer to me. From her outstretched palm erupted a column of crimson fire that twisted and coiled like a living thing. It didn't strike Lord Nexus. It didn't need to. The display of royal fire magic was warning enough. The court guards immediately withdrew, and even the most vocal of the 12 lords fell silent. Lord Nexus, his face pale beneath his red skin, dropped his dagger and backed away. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I acted in haste. Remove him, the queen commanded, and 2 guards immediately flanked the disgraced nobleman, escorting him from the hall. Queen Zareth turned to the remaining lords, the fire still dancing around her hand. Does anyone else wish to challenge my authority in this matter? One by one, the nobles averted their eyes, murmuring denials and placations. Then this inquest is concluded. She turned to Ren, who still knelt on the platform, blood dripping from his fresh wound. Rise, Ren Castile, protected of the crown. As he stood, she spoke softly enough that only he could hear. The first battle is won, but the war has just begun. Be vigilant. 3 days later, the central square of Ravathor's capital city was filled to capacity. Citizens from all walks of life, noble and common, native and foreign, gathered to witness an event unprecedented in living memory. Soldiers lined the perimeter, their formal armor gleaming in the light of the twin suns. At the center of the square stood a raised platform draped in the royal colors. Queen Zareth waited there, resplendent in full ceremonial armor that combined functionality with breathtaking artistry. At her side rested a sword unlike any other. Its blade appeared to be made of solid fire, contained somehow in the shape of a traditional longsword. Ren approached the platform, wearing the formal attire provided to him, black and crimson, but now embellished with silver threading that caught the light. The wound on his arm from Lord Nexus's dagger had been healed. Another application of the bloodlight magic that seemed to be the Queen's special prerogative. As he ascended the steps to the platform, he heard the murmurs of the crowd. Unlike in the Obsidian Hall, these whispers contained notes of admiration and curiosity alongside the inevitable suspicion. They say he took 3 poisoned arrows for her. Defeated an Alliance warbeast single-handed. A Terran, can you believe it? But the Queen herself vouched for him. Queen Zareth raised her hand, and the square fell silent. Her voice, magically amplified, carried to every corner of the gathering. People of Ravathor, we stand at a crossroads in our history. Our traditions have served us well. But times change, and we must adapt or perish. She gestured to Ren. This man, born far from our red sands, has demonstrated the highest virtues our society claims to value: courage, loyalty, self-sacrifice. Twice he has placed himself between me and death. Twice he has bled that I might live. She drew the fire sword, its blade casting a warm glow across the platform. Kneel, Ren Castle of New Mars. Ren knelt before her, his head bowed. By my authority as Queen of Ravathor, I hereby name you Knight of the Living Flame, Protector of the Crown, and honored warrior of our realm. She touched the flat of the blade to each of his shoulders in turn, the heat intense, but somehow not burning. Rise, Sir Ren, first of your order, As he stood, the crowd erupted in cheers, tentative at first, then growing in volume until the sound echoed off the surrounding buildings. The common people, it seemed, were more accepting of change than their noble counterparts. But not everyone joined in the celebration. At the edges of the square, Ren noticed small groups of nobles watching in stony silence, their expressions ranging from disapproval to outright hostility. Among them, he recognized several of the 12 lords, including the elderly Lord Vantus, whose ancient eyes carried the weight of centuries of tradition now being challenged. More concerning was the absence of Lord Nexus. After the incident in the Obsidian Hall, he had disappeared from public view, supposedly to reflect on his actions at his country estate. But Ren doubted that a man of such evident ambition and temper would accept his humiliation quietly. The ceremony concluded with Queen Zareth placing a medallion around Ren's neck, a disc of red gold emblazoned with the royal emblem, marking his new status for all to see. As they turned to face the cheering crowd, she spoke to him from the corner of her mouth. Smile, Sir Ren, you've just made history. And enemies, he murmured back. Those come with the territory of greatness, she replied. But also allies. Remember that. The celebration continued into the evening, with feasts and entertainments throughout the city. Ren found himself the center of attention, approached by curious citizens and cautious nobles alike. Some offered congratulations, others thinly veiled warnings disguised as advice. He navigated the unfamiliar social terrain as best he could, drawing on his military training to maintain composure amidst the political currents swirling around him. Late in the night, as the festivities began to wind down, Queen Zareth summoned him to a private audience in the royal gardens, a marvel of engineering that allowed desert plants to flourish in carefully controlled conditions. The air was cooler here, fragrant with the scent of rare blooms that opened only under the light of Ravathor's 3 moons. You've handled yourself well today, she said, as they walked along a path illuminated by bioluminescent fungi. Many expected you to stumble, to prove yourself unworthy of the honor bestowed upon you. I've disappointed them, then, Ren replied. Thoroughly. A smile touched her lips. But this is just the beginning. The title I've given you, Knight of the Living Flame, it's more than ceremonial. I have a purpose in mind for you. I assumed as much, Your Majesty. I'm at your service. She stopped walking and turned to face him directly. The assassination attempt was not an isolated incident. The Alliance grows bolder, and I suspect they have allies within my court. I need someone I can trust absolutely, Someone whose loyalty comes not from birth or obligation, but from choice. And you trust me because I chose to save you, Ren concluded. Precisely. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose by stepping in front of those arrows. Such actions reveal a person's true character more clearly than any oath or pledge. Ren considered her words. What would this purpose involve, exactly? Becoming my personal guard, advisor, and when necessary, my enforcer. Her golden eyes studied him intently. It's a dangerous position. The enemies you've made today will seek to remove you by any means necessary. I've faced danger before. Not like this, she warned. Court politics are more lethal than any battlefield. And the stakes are higher. Not just your life or mine, but the future of Ravathor itself. Ren glanced up at the night sky, where the 3 moons of Ravathor hung like pale sentinels. This wasn't his world. These weren't his people. And yet, I'll serve however you need me to, Your Majesty. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer. Then, your first duty begins tonight. Stay close. There are rumors of unrest in the lower city, and the anniversary celebration tomorrow will present an ideal opportunity for those who wish me harm. As if summoned by her words, a royal guard appeared at the garden entrance, his posture tense. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. There's been an incident in the Eastern Quarter. The people are demanding your presence. Queen Zareth's expression hardened. What kind of incident? A fire, Your Majesty, at the public archives. Some are saying it was deliberately set. She exchanged a meaningful glance with Ren. Prepare my transport. Sir Ren will accompany me. As they hurried from the garden, the Queen whispered. And so it begins. The night that followed tested Ren's new role immediately. The fire at the archives had indeed been arson, a distraction, as it turned out, to cover the theft of certain historical documents related to the royal bloodline. The Queen's presence had calmed the public, but the underlying message was clear. Someone was challenging her authority, possibly laying groundwork for questioning her legitimacy. They returned to the palace well after midnight. The Queen visibly tired, but her mind still sharp. Rest while you can, she advised Ren as they parted ways in the royal wing. Tomorrow's anniversary celebration will require all our vigilance. Ren was assigned quarters near the Queen's own chambers, a practical arrangement for her personal guard, but one that would undoubtedly fuel court gossip. The room was luxurious beyond anything he had ever experienced, with furnishings that would have cost a year's military salary. Despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded him. His soldier's instincts, honed by years of combat, kept him alert to every sound in the unfamiliar environment. It was well past the midnight hour when he heard it, a soft scraping sound from the balcony outside his chambers. Moving silently, Ren retrieved the ceremonial sword he'd been given as part of his new station. Unlike the Queen's fire blade, this was conventional steel, though of exceptional quality. He positioned himself beside the balcony doors, waiting. The intruder was skilled. That much was evident from the way they disabled the security measures without triggering alarms. The balcony doors slid open with barely a whisper, and a shadow detached itself from the darkness outside. Ren waited until the assassin was fully inside before striking. His blade caught the moonlight as it arced toward the intruder, who reacted with inhuman speed, parrying the blow with a short dagger that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They fought in near silence, the clash of steel against steel muffled somehow by the assassin's strange weapon. Ren quickly realized he faced no ordinary killer. The figure moved with fluid grace that spoke of extensive training, anticipating Ren's attacks with uncanny precision. A lucky strike grazed Ren's cheek, the blade burning like ice where it touched his skin. Poison. Again. These Alliance assassins were nothing if not consistent in their methods. With a desperate surge of strength, Ren managed to knock his opponent off balance. As the assassin stumbled, the hood of their cloak fell back, revealing features that caused Ren's blood to run cold. The face was Lord Nexus's, but horribly altered. The red skin now mottled with patches of deathly white. The golden eyes filmed over with a milky substance that reflected the moonlight in an eerie glow. "What have they done to you?" Ren whispered, momentarily shocked. The thing that had been Lord Nexus smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. "Improved me," it hissed in a voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep within its chest. "As they will improve all of Ravathor once the Queen is removed." It lunged again, its movements becoming increasingly erratic and powerful. Ren defended himself as best he could, but he was being driven back toward the balcony. One misstep would send him plummeting to the courtyard far below. The twisted nobleman-turned-assassin seemed to sense victory. "The Upper Alliance sends its regards," it sneered, raising its dagger for a killing blow. But the strike never fell. A blast of crimson energy struck the assassin squarely in the chest, sending it crashing into the wall with bone-crushing force. Queen Zareth stood in the doorway to Ren's chambers, her hand extended, wisps of fire magic still dancing around her fingers. "I suspected they might try for you first," she said, approaching cautiously. "Though I didn't expect Nexus to be their instrument." The assassin stirred, attempting to rise despite its injuries. The Queen gestured again, and bands of red energy encircled the creature, binding it securely. "What is he?" Ren asked, wiping blood from his cheek. The poison burned, but less intensely than the arrows had. Perhaps a weaker variant. Or maybe his exposure to the first batch had granted him some resistance. "Not entirely human anymore," Queen Zareth replied grimly. "The Upper Alliance has been experimenting with forbidden technologies, ways to enhance their agents at the cost of their humanity. We've heard rumors, but this is the first confirmation we've seen." She knelt beside the bound assassin, examining it with a mixture of disgust and pity. He was a fool to accept their improvements. The process is irreversible and ultimately fatal. The creature that had been Lord Nexus laughed, a horrible, gurgling sound. "You know nothing, false queen. The Alliance knows your secret. The archives told us everything." Queen Zareth's expression remained impassive. "What secret would that be, Nexus?" "The royal line is already broken," it spat. "The documents prove it. Your ancestor, 5 generations back, an imposter, a changeling. You have no legitimate claim to the throne." The Queen sighed. "Is that the best lie the Alliance could fabricate? Those documents you stole were copies. Nexus. The originals remain secure, and they tell a different story." Uncertainty flickered across the assassin's mutated features. "You're lying." "Am I?" She stood, looking down at the pathetic creature. "It hardly matters now. You've committed treason against the crown, attempted to assassinate a knight of the realm, and subjected yourself to forbidden technology. The penalty is death." "Then kill me," it challenged. "Make me a martyr to your tyranny." "No," Queen Zareth said coldly. "You chose to become something other than human. You'll be studied, so that we might better understand the enemy we face." She gestured to the guards who had arrived in response to the commotion. "Take it to the secure research facility. Full containment protocols." As the guards dragged the struggling assassin away, the Queen turned to Ren. "You're injured. The poison—" "Not as bad as before," he assured her, though his vision had begun to blur at the edges. "I'll live." She touched his cheek gently, her fingers cool against his burning skin. A tingling sensation spread from the point of contact as her blood-light magic neutralized the poison. "Better?" Ren nodded, suddenly aware of their proximity. "Thank you, Your Majesty." "Zareth," she said softly, "when we're alone, I'd prefer you called me Zareth." Before he could respond, an explosion rocked the palace, the sound reverberating through the stone walls. Distant alarms began to wail. The anniversary celebration, Ren realized. It was never about me or the archives. It was always about tomorrow, Today now. Queen Zareth's face hardened into a mask of determination. The Upper Alliance makes its move. Come, Sir Ren. We have a battle to win. They raced through the corridors of the palace, guards and servants scrambling in all directions as the situation deteriorated. Reports flooded in from all quarters. Alliance heavy weapons vessels had entered Ravathor's airspace. Ground forces were attacking the northern gate. And worst of all, explosions had been reported in the sacred fire chamber, deep beneath the palace. "The fire crystal," the queen said, her voice tight with concern. "If they've breached the chamber—" "What's the fire crystal?" Ren asked as they hurried toward the palace's central lift. "The source of royal power, the heart of Ravathor itself. An artifact from the first landing, said to contain the essence of our twin suns." She punched an access code into the lift's control panel. "If the Alliance captures it, or worse, destroys it—" She didn't need to finish the thought. The gravity of the situation was clear in her expression. The lift plunged downward at dizzying speed, bypassing dozens of levels before finally slowing near the bottom of its shaft. The doors opened to reveal a scene of chaos. Royal guards lay dead or wounded in the antechamber to the fire chamber, evidence of a fierce battle that had clearly been lost. At the far end of the antechamber, the massive doors to the chamber itself stood open, a sacrilege that made Queen Zareth gasp in shock. Through those doors, Ren could see a pulsing crimson light and hear the sounds of ongoing conflict. "Stay behind me," the queen commanded, drawing her fire sword. The blade blazed to life, responding to her emotions with an intensity that cast stark shadows across the carnage. They advanced cautiously through the antechamber, checking for survivors among the fallen guards. A few still lived, and the queen paused briefly to stabilize them with her bloodlight magic. "Alliance forces," one wounded guard managed to say, "led by one of ours, a traitor." "Who?" Zareth demanded. The guard coughed, blood speckling his lips. "Councillor Mathis, of the Fourth House." Ren recognized the name, a minor noble who served as advisor to the royal treasury. Unassuming, easily overlooked, the perfect spy. "How many?" Ren asked. "6, maybe 7, heavily armed." The guard's eyes fluttered closed as he lost consciousness. Zareth and Ren exchanged a glance. They were outnumbered, but they had the element of surprise. And more importantly, they had no choice. They entered the fire chamber silently, keeping to the shadows along the perimeter. The chamber was vast, circular, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. At its center, suspended in a field of energy, hovered a crystal the size of a man's head, pulsing with inner fire, casting its crimson glow throughout the space. Beneath it stood Councillor Mathis, his unremarkable features transformed by triumph as he directed a team of Alliance technicians. They were setting up some kind of device around the crystal, a containment unit, Ren guessed, designed to safely transport the artifact. "Hurry," Mathis urged them. "The upper forces can't hold the palace indefinitely." "It's not that simple," one technician replied, frustration evident in her voice. "The crystal's energy signature is fluctuating. If we rush this, it could destabilize." "I don't care about your technical difficulties," Mathis snapped. "The Upper Alliance has waited generations for this opportunity. We will not fail now." Queen Zareth stepped out of the shadows, her fire sword blazing. "No, Mathis, you've already failed." The councillor whirled, shock quickly giving way to calculation as he assessed the situation. "Your Majesty," he said, offering a mocking bow. "How kind of you to join us. We feared we might have to come looking for you." Ren positioned himself slightly behind the queen, watching the Alliance technicians who had abandoned their work to draw weapons. 6 of them, plus Mathis. Not great odds. "Step away from the crystal," Zareth commanded, her voice ringing with authority. "This is your only warning." Mathis laughed. "Or what? You'll execute me like you plan to execute Nexus?" I think not, he gestured, and the technicians spread out, creating a loose semicircle. You're outnumbered, Your Majesty, even with your pet Terran at your side. Outnumbered doesn't mean outmatched, Ren said quietly, assessing each opponent. Standard Alliance energy weapons, defensive vests, but no obvious enhancements like Nexus had displayed. The famous Sir Ren, Matis sneered. The Queen's new favorite. Tell me, does she reward your services generously? Or is the honor of serving her enough for a low-caste nobody like yourself? Ren didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he was watching the technician nearest the crystal, who had returned to the containment device while her colleagues provided cover. Whatever they planned to do with the fire crystal, they were still intent on completing their mission. Zareth, he murmured, nodding toward the technician. The Queen saw the danger immediately. Matis, you don't understand what you're tampering with. The crystal isn't just a symbol or a power source. It's connected to the planet itself. Remove it improperly, and you risk— Spare me your superstitions, Mathis interrupted. Our scientists have studied this technology for decades. We know exactly what we're doing. The technician at the containment device made a final adjustment, and the device hummed to life. A field of blue energy began to form around the fire crystal, clashing with the natural crimson aura that surrounded it. No! Zareth shouted, raising her hand. A blast of fire magic shot toward the containment device, but one of the technicians intercepted it with some kind of energy shield. The confrontation erupted into violence. The Alliance forces opened fire, their energy weapons discharging with distinctive high-pitched whines. Zareth deflected several shots with her fire sword, while Ren ducked and rolled, closing the distance to the nearest attacker. Years of military training took over. Ren disarmed his first opponent with a precise strike to the wrist, then used the man's own momentum to throw him into a second attacker. He claimed the fallen energy weapon and fired at a third technician who was aiming at the Queen's back. Zareth fought with a combination of martial skill and fire magic that was breathtaking to behold. Her sword cut through the air in blazing arcs, and when opponents were too far for the blade, she hurled bolts of crimson energy that knocked them off their feet. But despite their prowess, they were being forced away from the crystal. The containment device's blue field was growing stronger, beginning to compress around the artifact. Where the two energy fields met, blue and crimson, dangerous sparks of white-hot energy crackled and spat. "We need to stop that device!" Ren shouted over the din of battle. "Cover me!" Zareth called back, beginning to gather a massive surge of fire magic between her hands. Ren positioned himself between her and the remaining attackers, firing the energy weapon with one hand while wielding his sword with the other. He took a glancing hit to his shoulder, but didn't falter. Behind him, Zareth completed her spell, a concentrated beam of fire magic more intense than anything Ren had yet seen. It lanced toward the containment device, overwhelming the defensive measures and striking it directly. For a moment, it seemed they had succeeded. The blue field flickered and began to collapse. But then the technician at the controls made a desperate adjustment, and the device surged with renewed power. The fire crystal, caught between opposing forces, began to pulse erratically. Cracks appeared in the chamber floor, and the air itself seemed to thicken with power. "It's destabilizing!" the technician cried in alarm. "Counselor, we need to abort!" Mathis, who had kept himself safely back from the fighting, shook his head. "No, we're too close. Increase power to the containment field." "That will trigger a catastrophic release," the technician protested. "The entire palace could—" "Do it!" Mathis commanded. Ren saw the moment the technician made her choice, duty to her mission overriding her survival instinct. She turned back to the controls and began the fatal sequence. Time seemed to slow. Ren saw the crystal's pulsing increase to a dangerous rhythm. He saw Zareth's face, understanding the imminent disaster. He saw the thick blast doors at the entrance to the chamber, beginning to close automatically, in response to the detected instability, a failsafe to contain the impending explosion. Without hesitation, Ren sprinted toward the containment device. Energy blasts sizzled past him, one grazing his leg, but he didn't slow. He reached the technician and knocked her aside with a sweep of his arm, then plunged his sword directly into the heart of the device. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Feedback surged through the system, overloading circuits and shattering components. The blue containment field collapsed, but the damage was done. The crystal's stability had been compromised. "Ren!" Zareth shouted. "The doors!" He turned to see the blast doors nearly closed. With the queen still inside the chamber, she could have escaped, but she was holding the doors partially open with her fire magic, giving him a chance to get out. Between them, the fire crystal pulsed with blinding intensity. Its crimson light now shot through with veins of white that grew brighter by the second. Mathis and the surviving Alliance forces were already fleeing through a secondary exit, a tunnel that likely led to an escape vessel. There was no time to pursue them. Ren ran for the main doors, diving through the narrowing gap just as Zareth's strength gave out. The massive doors slammed shut behind him, sealing the chamber completely. But Zareth wasn't with him. "No!" he shouted, pounding on the impenetrable doors. "Zareth!" Through the small observation port in the door, he could see her standing before the destabilizing crystal. Her hands raised, crimson energy flowing from her body to create a protective sphere around the artifact. She was trying to contain the explosion, to save the palace, the city, perhaps the entire planet, at the cost of her own life. Ren frantically searched for an override, some way to reopen the doors, but the systems had locked down completely. Through the port, he watched in horror as the crystal's light grew blindingly bright. Zareth's silhouette was barely visible now, a dark shape against the overwhelming radiance. Then came the explosion, but not as Ren had expected. Instead of a destructive blast, the crystal released its energy in a controlled pulse that expanded to fill the chamber, then contracted back into itself with tremendous force. The observation port was briefly opaque with light, preventing Ren from seeing what happened inside. When his vision cleared, he pressed his face to the port again, desperate for any sign of the queen. The chamber was filled with smoke and debris, but at its center, the fire crystal still hovered, stabilized somehow. Its pulsing returned to a steady rhythm, and beneath it, collapsed on the floor, lay Zareth. "Open these doors!" Ren shouted to the guards who had begun to arrive, drawn by the commotion. "The queen is inside!" It took precious minutes to override the safety protocols and force the blast doors open. Ren was the first inside, rushing to Zareth's side through the settling dust and smoke. She was alive, but barely. Her normally vibrant red skin had paled to a dull orange, and the silver in her hair had spread, turning it almost entirely white. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse weak beneath Ren's fingers. "Zareth," he said urgently, cradling her head. "Hold on. The healers are coming." Her golden eyes flickered open, focusing on his face with effort. "The crystal?" "Stable," he assured her. "You did it. You saved it." A faint smile touched her lips. "We did. You destroyed the device. Gave me the chance to—" She coughed, her body shuddering with the effort. "Don't talk," Ren urged. "Save your strength." She shook her head slightly. "Listen, the bloodlight magic. It's tied to the crystal. When it destabilized, I had to use my own life force to rebalance it." Her voice weakened with each word. "I'm fading. Ren." "No," he said fiercely. "I won't let you die. Not after everything." "Some things, even a queen can't command." She reached up with trembling fingers to touch his face. "But there is a way, if you're willing." "Anything," he promised without hesitation. Her hand moved to the medallion he wore, the symbol of his knighthood. "The blood bond. It would link us, share my burden with you. But it's dangerous. never been attempted with an outsider. Around them, palace guards and medical personnel had begun to enter the chamber, but they kept a respectful distance, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Do it," Ren said. "Whatever it takes." Zareth's fingers closed around the medallion, and she whispered words in an ancient language that seemed to resonate with the crystal above them. The medallion grew warm against Ren's chest, then hot, then painful, but he didn't pull away. Crimson light flowed from the crystal to Zareth, then from her to Ren through the medallion. He gasped as foreign energy surged through his body, rewriting something fundamental in his being. It burned like the poisoned arrows had, but deeper, reaching into his very essence. The queen's body arched as some of her burden transferred to him. Color returned to her skin, the deathly pallor receding. At the same time, Ren felt his own skin warm unnaturally, taking on a faint reddish tint that had never been there before. The exchange lasted only seconds, but when it was done, both of them were transformed. Zareth sat up, her strength partially restored, while Ren felt simultaneously exhausted and energized, as if a new power hummed just beneath his skin. "What did you do to me?" he asked, looking at his hands in wonder. The veins beneath his skin pulsed with a faint crimson light. "Made you part of Ravathor," she replied, her voice stronger now. "The first outsider to carry royal bloodlight within them." She held his gaze. "We are connected now, more deeply than knight and queen, more intimately than words can express." The implications of what she had done, what they had done together, were staggering. Ren knew instinctively that the act had shattered the final barrier of tradition, crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. "The 12 lords will have a fit," he remarked, attempting levity despite the profound change he felt within himself. Zareth's laugh was weak but genuine. "Let them. We have more pressing concerns." Her expression sobered. "Mathis escaped with his remaining forces. The Upper Alliance now knows the crystal can be destabilized. They'll try again, with better preparation." Ren nodded. "Then we'll be ready for them." Guards helped them both to their feet. The crisis was temporarily averted, but the battle for Ravathor's future had only just begun. In the days that followed, the planet was transformed, both physically and politically. The destabilization of the fire crystal, though contained, had triggered seismic activity across Ravathor's surface. New fissures opened in the desert, releasing long-trapped gases and minerals that altered the very composition of the atmosphere. The twin suns seemed to burn more intensely, their light taking on a deeper crimson hue. But the political landscape had shifted even more dramatically. News of the Queen's near sacrifice and the blood bond with Sir Ren spread through the population with the speed of wildfire. The common people, already warming to the idea of an outsider champion, now embraced the notion fully. Tales of the battle in the fire chamber grew with each retelling, transforming both Zareth and Ren into figures of legend. The 12 lords, however, were divided. Some saw the blood bond as the final desecration of sacred tradition, while others recognized the pragmatic necessity of adaptation in the face of the Alliance threat. The council meetings became battlegrounds of ideology, with Lord Vantis leading the traditionalists against a growing faction of progressives. 3 days after the attack, Queen Zareth called for a public ceremony in the Blood Moon Square. Citizens from all quarters of the capital gathered, curious about what announcement their monarch would make. The atmosphere was tense but hopeful. The Alliance attack had been repelled, but everyone understood that it was merely the first battle in a longer war. At the center of the square, craftsmen had worked day and night to erect a monument, a statue of black stone and golden steel. It depicted Sir Ren kneeling before Queen Zareth, his body positioned to shield her from invisible arrows. The craftsmanship was exquisite, capturing both the urgency of that moment on the battlefield and the deeper significance of his sacrifice. Queen Zareth, fully recovered thanks to the shared burden of the blood bond, stood before the assembled crowd in her most formal regalia. At her side stood Ren, his appearance subtly altered by the bond. His skin now carried a faint reddish undertone, and his eyes, once dark brown, now held flecks of gold that caught the light. "People of Ravathor," the queen began, her voice carrying across the hushed square. "We have faced darkness and emerged stronger. The Upper Alliance sought to steal our most sacred artifact, to undermine the very foundation of our society. They failed, but they will try again." A murmur passed through the crowd, a mixture of determination and anxiety. "For too long, we have been bound by traditions that once served us, but now hold us back. The belief that bloodline determines worth, that birth dictates destiny, these are chains that we have forged ourselves." She gestured to the statue. "This man, born far from our red sands, has demonstrated that loyalty and courage know no bloodline. He stepped in front of flying arrows to save your queen. He risked everything to protect our sacred crystal. And in doing so, he has earned something no outsider has ever received, a share in the royal bloodlight itself." Gasps and exclamations rippled through the assembly. Many had heard rumors of the blood bond, but to have it confirmed so publicly was unprecedented. "Look upon this monument," Zareth continued, "and remember that it honors not just one man's courage, but the potential within all of us to rise above the circumstances of our birth, to become more than what tradition dictates we must be." She turned to face Ren directly, taking his hand in a gesture that would once have been unthinkable between monarch and subject. "Sir Ren, Knight of the Living Flame, I name you Royal Protector and First Counselor of Ravathor. Let all who see you know that you speak with my voice and act with my authority." Another wave of surprise moved through the crowd, followed by a swell of cheering that grew in volume until it echoed off the surrounding buildings. The common people, it seemed, were ready for change. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Ren noticed a group of children gathered around the base of the statue, gazing up at it with wide-eyed wonder. One small girl, her red skin still vibrant with youth, reached out to touch the inscription carved into the black stone pedestal. "What does it say?" she asked her companion, apparently unable to read the formal script. An older boy traced the letters with his finger. "It says, 'The man without title, who stepped before arrows for the royal house.'" The girl tilted her head, considering the words. "Will people remember him forever?" "Yes," the boy replied confidently. "That's what statues are for, so we never forget." Ren felt a presence at his side and turned to find Zareth watching the children as well, a soft smile on her lips. "It seems you've inspired the next generation," she said quietly. "Is that what all this was about?" he asked. "Creating a symbol for them to look up to?" She considered the question seriously. "Partly. Symbols have power. They shape how people think, what they believe is possible." She met his gaze directly. "But it's more than that. You changed me, Ren. You made me question traditions I had never thought to challenge. Your actions forced me to see beyond the narrow confines of royal protocol, to recognize courage and loyalty wherever they appear." "And the blood bond? Was that symbolic too?" "No." She touched the medallion he wore, her fingers lingering over the spot where it rested against his chest. "That was survival, necessity, and perhaps something more personal." Before he could respond, a royal messenger approached, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. We've received word from our outpost in the Western Territories. Alliance forces have been spotted gathering near the border." Zareth's expression hardened. "How many?" "More than before, Your Majesty. And they have new weapons, technology we've never encountered." The Queen exchanged a glance with Ren. "It seems our enemies are not content to lick their wounds for long." "They never are," Ren replied. "But neither are we." As they turned to face this new threat together, the statue stood silently behind them, a monument not just to one act of heroism, but to the beginning of a new era for Ravathor. An era where birth mattered less than choice, where tradition bent to accommodate courage, and where a queen and her unlikely protector forged a bond that would be remembered for generations to come. On distant planets, children would whisper the story of the man who bled for the queen as the ultimate symbol of loyalty and humanity. How one selfless act had changed the course of history and redefined what it meant to be noble. For it wasn't bloodline that made one royal, but the willingness to bleed for others.